Chapter 1695. Chu Luiyue was shocked. Her pupils constricted and her heart was in her throat. However, the water droplet didn't go far away. It just floated quietly in front of her. Although the surrounding light was dim, the water droplet was still bright and dazzling. Don't worry. Now that it has recognized you as its master, I won't take it back. The voice of the person opposite her had a teasing tone. Chu Luiyue relaxed and calmed the waves in her heart. She cupped her fists and bowed respectfully to the person opposite her. I lost my composure for a moment. Please forgive me, senior. She could now confirm that this person was indeed the previous owner of the water droplet. No one had ever been able to summon the water droplet away so easily. This person was really her senior. The other party laughed again. It's your chance to get this thing. I'm no longer its master. It's just that I haven't seen it for so long that I miss it. As he spoke, Chu Luiyue saw the water droplet sway gently. Then, it gradually extended into a transparent remnant page. No, actually, it couldn't be considered transparent at this time. On it, several dazzling streams of light were flowing slowly and brilliantly. Chu Luiyue was slightly stunned. This thing was actually a Guqin score. For the past few years, she had been completely unaware of it. As if seeing through her thoughts, the person opposite her smiled and said, "This is only one of the pages. There's only a small section of incomplete music score on it. It can't be played. It's normal that you don't recognize it." Chu Luiyue nodded in understanding. However, she was still rather surprised. When she got this thing, she could tell that it seemed to be a page that was forcibly torn from a book. She had a lot of guesses about its origin. However, she really didn't expect it to be a Guqin score. I thought you would have come earlier. I didn't expect it to take so long. As the person spoke, his fingertips moved. A transparent book suddenly appeared out of thin air. It was flowing with brilliant colors and brilliant light. Chu Luiyue's eyes hurt from the light. He subconsciously turned his face away and narrowed his eyes. However, she did not raise her hand to cover her eyes. She would rather endure the pain in her eyes and stare at the book, afraid that she would miss something. She didn't even need to think to know that this book must be the zither score that the other party had mentioned earlier. That page must belong to this book. This music score has been with me for many years. Now, I can finally find a new owner for it. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. She had always wanted to find the rest of the items, but she never had the chance. Who would have thought that all of this would be laid out right in front of her? However, this book is actually not complete. The other party's sudden change in topic made Chu Luiyue's heart sink slightly. Back then, they tore this good zither score into 3 pieces. Now, other than the 2 portions here, even I don't know the whereabouts of the remaining portion. That person shook his head regretfully. When Chu Luiyue heard this, she felt that something was wrong. Back then. Trespass. This zither score, wait. A white light suddenly flashed in Chu Luiyue's mind. Taizu once said that tens of thousands of years ago, the earth-shattering battle where the gods fell seemed to be for a book. Could it be, this is the book? This is the book. That person said with a faint smile. Chu Luiyue was shocked. She clearly didn't say anything just now, and her expression was very calm. However, why did the other party seem to know all of her thoughts like the back of his hand? This is my place. Naturally, I can peek into some of your thoughts. However, you don't have to worry too much. I can only sense a part of it, and it's mostly related to this zither score. As for the other thoughts that you've hidden deeply, it's hard for me to know. Of course, I'm not interested in those. Chu Luiyue heaved a sigh of relief. She did not doubt his words at all. With the other party's strength, it was really easy for him to deal with her. There was no need for him to beat around the bush. I've embarrassed myself in front of Senior. Chu Liuyue's attitude was very proper, and she bowed politely. She knew very well that in front of such a person, any tricks would be useless. He might as well do it openly and honestly. However, this time, the waves in her heart didn't stop for a long time. It was obvious how precious this zither score was for so many high gods and even venerables to fight for it. She had been very emotional before, but she didn't expect that the treasure that once caused chaos in the world was in her hands. Although it was only an incomplete part, there were many cultivators in the world who wanted to get this page, but they couldn't find it. When she thought of this, Chu Liuyue's heart beat faster, and her blood seemed to be boiling. She knew that this thing was extraordinary. However, after knowing the truth, she was still shocked. The other party seemed to be satisfied with Chu Liuyue's reaction. Although this zither score was divided into 3 parts, there is still a connection between them. Since the one in your hand was the first to awaken and let you be the master, the other 2 parts will naturally follow you and let you be the master. The 3rd part has been lost for a long time, and it won't be found in a short time. Let's not talk about it for now. You can take my share first. Chu Liyue had already guessed the other party's plan, but when she heard this, she was still surprised. Such a precious treasure was actually given to her so easily. You don't have to feel burdened. Although I was its previous master, I'm now just a remnant consciousness in this zither score. I can help you speed up the flow of time in this space, but correspondingly, the pressure and torture you have to bear will also increase exponentially. Can you still insist on this? Chu Liyue held her breath and nodded seriously. Thank you, Senior. Even if she had to go through more pain and the process was more difficult, she had to do it. After all, she was no longer alone. There were many people who loved her and were waiting for her. She had to get out as soon as possible. Ah Jing seemed to have expected her choice. He chuckled and shook his head. I hope you won't regret it. Chu Liyue's eyes were cold and stubborn. I won't regret anything I've done in my life. This time, it was the same. Good. Ah Jing suddenly laughed. Since you have the courage, then, let me see if you have the ability. Apart from other things, this little girl's courage was quite to his liking. The key was whether she could do it or not. Clang! He waved his fingertips and the sound of a zither broke through the air. Chu Liyue felt a chill and immediately felt the atmosphere around her suddenly change. The sound of the zither was bleak and the world was filled with killing intent. Digression, Merry Christmas. The New Year's Day event is here. Everyone, are you ready? It starts at midnight on January 1st and ends at midnight on January 3rd. The event lasts for 3 days. 1. The comments section. Every day, 6%, 16%, 26%, 36%, 46%, 56%, 66%, 76%, 86%, 96% will get 66 Xiaoxiang dollars. 2. Every day, choose 3 favorite comments in the comments section and win a share. Finally, recommend Mr. N's new book, Mr. She wants to announce it every day. Pet article, no abuse, strong woman, group favorite. After Wan Qi became popular. Anti-fans, no matter how beautiful she is, she's uncultured. That afternoon, the best university in China posted on its Weibo, let me introduce the youngest doctoral supervisor in our university, Professor Wan Qi. Anti-fans, what's the use of being a top student? In the end, she has to bow down to her sugar daddy. The next day, Wan Qi appeared at the International Economic Conference. Her name tag was signed, CEO of Qimu Pharmaceutical Group. Anti-fans, she earns so much money and doesn't even know how to contribute to the country. 3 days later, the official news was released. the latest nuclear submarine has been released. Thank you to the chief designer, Yuan Qi, and all the research and development team. Anti-fans, can't afford to offend, goodbye. After the wedding, a reporter asked Shizhou, ninth master, how did you get Goddess Yuan? Shizhou silently opened a diary. Wife chasing diary, 1. Make a ranking for my baby. 2. Vote for my baby. 3. Show support for my baby. 4. Book the entire theater for my baby's movie. 5. Join my baby's fan club. As everyone knew, Goddess Yuan had a super rich fan, ninth master Shizhou. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1697. Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat, and she immediately became alert. She knew how terrifying the sound of the zither was. She had vomited blood when she was outside the wall, let alone now. The two of them were so close, and the only thing she could do was accept it. Moreover, according to Senior Jing, if she wanted to combine the two pieces of music, she had to understand the music first. Chu Liyue took a deep breath and calmed herself down. Then, in the midst of the clanging music, she raised her hand and reached for the book. However, just as her fingertips touched the side of the transparent book, the latter suddenly flew up. Whoosh! Chu Liyue looked up instinctively, only to see countless transparent pages scattered all over the sky. That book had actually scattered just like that. In an instant, all she could see were the transparent pages glowing with a faint, gorgeous light. They were scattered messily and randomly in every corner of the space, almost filling the entire space. Chu Liyue looked around, and there were flashing lights everywhere. It was extremely gorgeous. However, this scene caused her heart to instantly surge with an intense uneasiness. Actually, there are only 3 pieces of music in that book. In that booklet, except for one real one, the rest were all fake. If you want to perfectly combine the 2 pieces of music, the first step is to find the real one among the tens of thousands of pieces. Jing's voice was still casual, but in Chu Liyue's ears, it was no different from a sudden clap of thunder. It shocked her to the core. Only one piece among the tens of thousands of pieces was real. How long would she have to search? Most importantly, she didn't even know how to distinguish the real from the fake. Actually, you don't have to worry about this. The first piece of music is with you, and it has already recognized you as its owner. It will be much easier to find the second piece. However, the differences between these pieces of music are very small, so you have to look at each piece carefully. Although most of these pieces of music are fake, looking at each piece requires a lot of force and mental strength. With your current strength, you should be able to finish one in 3 days. That was also the reason why he said that he would need 100 years to complete this task. Chu Liyue's eyelids twitched violently. 1 every 3 days. There were tens of thousands of them here. Who knew how long it would take? Needless to say, this was only the first step. In the face of Chu Liyue's silence, Jing thought for a moment and comforted him. It's okay. Practice makes perfect. In the future, your reading speed will definitely become faster and faster. With his status and personality, it was rare for him to say such comforting words. If it weren't for the fact that Chu Liyue was the only heir to this score, he would never have been so kind and patient. With first young master and the 2 elders around, you don't have to worry. Besides, second young mistress has always been clever and intelligent. Isn't the task you've given her a piece of cake? Don't worry. Hearing his words, Nan Yifun's face also revealed a smug and doting smile. He only had this one daughter. She was beautiful and talented, so of course he doted on her very much. This time, it was rare for him to be so firm with Nan Yi. But at the end of the day, it was for her own good. Although that child was very dissatisfied with him because of this matter, she should understand his painstaking efforts after a few years when she matured. I hope so. Nan Yifan retracted his gaze and planned to turn around and enter the house. However, he had just taken a step when he suddenly felt something and his expression changed abruptly. The old servant beside him immediately sensed that something was wrong and asked with concern. "Head, what's wrong?" He had followed Nan Yifan for several years and rarely saw such an expression on his face. Nan Yifan clenched his fists, and there seemed to be huge waves in his eyes. Yi's aura suddenly disappeared. As soon as he said that, the old servant's expression changed instantly. How could this be? Nan Yifan quickly pushed the door open and entered. The old man followed closely behind and immediately locked the door. After entering, Nan Yifan took out a jade pendant. Inside, 4 light spots floated gently. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1698. Seeing this, Nan Yifan finally heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the aura of Nan Yi and the others was stored in it. If anything happened to any of them, this jade pendant would immediately react. Judging from the current situation, these 4 people should still be alive. But, why did they suddenly lose contact? Nan Yifan only had 1 son and 1 daughter, and he loved them very much. Therefore, Nan Yifan specially made a lot of preparations to be able to contact them anytime and anywhere. But now, the connection was suddenly cut off. How could he not be anxious? Uncle Dan, something must have happened to them. Nan Yifan said resolutely. The old man called Uncle Dan also frowned. What about eldest young master? You. Nan Yifan's face darkened. He can't be contacted either. If not for this, he wouldn't be so nervous. Uncle Dan didn't expect the matter to be so serious and hurriedly tried to persuade him. Patriarch, don't worry. You see, they're still fine now, aren't they? As for why they can't be contacted, there must be a reason. I'll investigate immediately. With that, he turned around and planned to walk out. Nan Yifan put away the jade pendant and gritted his teeth. There's no need to investigate. Something must have happened in the god-slaying tomb. Other than this, he couldn't think of any other reason. He pondered for a moment, then walked out without any hesitation. I'll go to the god-slaying tomb personally. Uncle Dan was shocked. Patriarch, aren't you in too much of a hurry to go now? The clan. There's no time. Nan Yifan stopped in his tracks, and his face turned even uglier. Even if they encountered any trouble in the past, this has never happened before. This time, they must have encountered great danger. What kind of place is the god-slaying tomb? If we don't go there in time, I'm afraid it will be too late. Uncle Dan wanted to say something but hesitated. He was actually very worried about the situation of those people. But many people in the clan didn't know about them going there this time. If the patriarch went there, the news would definitely spread like wildfire. At that time, he was afraid, Uncle Dan, now is not the time to care about that. If something really happened to Yuxing and Yi. Nan Yifan didn't finish his sentence. But his expression said it all. No matter what the consequences were, as long as she was fine, everything was fine. But if he was gone, then there would be nothing left. At that time, he wouldn't even have the chance to make up for it or regret it. Uncle Dan was shocked and immediately lowered his head. Patriarch is right, this old servant was muddle-headed. Nan Yifan waved his hand. I know you're looking out for the big picture, but this matter involves the god-slaying mound. I'm afraid you can't care about that. He frowned and thought for a moment. Please invite Luo Yen and the others to come with us. Uncle Dan was stunned for a moment. It wasn't that she had never seen a battle before. She had even fought on the battlefield herself, killing countless people in the midst of life and death with the flash of her blade and the shadow of her sword. She had seen the scene of corpses strewn all over the place more than once. However, that scene paled in comparison to the scene that was constantly emerging in her mind. It was not worth mentioning at all. She wanted to throw all these images out of her mind, but it was in vain. Because all of this was a part of the song. Therefore, she could only choose to accept it. She constantly forced herself to concentrate all her energy and listen to every note of the song. This was undoubtedly an extremely cruel torture for Chu Luiyue. Her whole body seemed to be cut in half. Half of her attention was focused on the music score in her hand, while the other half was constantly experiencing the bloody and terrible things. Finally, a stream of red blood slowly overflowed from the corner of her mouth. It dripped on the back of her hand. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. When she saw what it was, she sucked in a breath of cold air and suddenly opened her eyes wide. That was actually half a bone. Because most of the bones were buried underground and the exposed parts seemed to be broken from the middle, Nani was unable to recognize what kind of bones they were. The only thing he could be sure of was that it belonged to a human cultivator. Also, the bone was lustrous and one could tell at a glance that its owner's realm was not low when he was alive. But how could Nani care about this now? She stared fixedly at the half of the white bone. Her mind was in a mess, and her mind was in a mess. Why was there such a bone here? She didn't notice it at all before. She didn't know who it belonged to. She had walked in the divine ruins for so long and had never seen half a bone. Now, wait. At this thought, Nani's mind finally cleared up. No. There must be a problem here. She had traveled day and night in the divine ruins with Big Brother and the others. They had walked so far and there was nothing but broken tombstones all over the ground. This was the first bone she had seen in the god-slaying tomb. But, why would it appear here? She stared at the bone for a long time and finally couldn't help but take 2 steps forward. Suddenly, a weak and hoarse voice entered her ears. Let me out. I can take you out. Nani's heart skipped a beat. She took 2 steps back and stared at the bone as if she had seen a ghost. She was sure that your voice just now came from below. Who are you? Because of fear, her voice trembled badly. After a pause, the voice sounded again. You don't need to know. You just need to know that I can help you leave this place. Do you want to make this deal or not? This tone was terrifyingly calm, but it also carried a force that made people unconsciously believe in it. Nani tried her best to calm herself down. If I help you, can you guarantee that you won't hurt me after we get out? The voice seemed to laugh. You're not worthy of me doing it myself. It seemed that he didn't take Nani seriously at all. Nani was furious, but she didn't dare to flare up. On second thought, this person might really not be an ordinary person. Since you don't like me, why ask me for help? The other party was silent for a moment before saying. Of course it's because, you can help me. You can take out that thing around your neck and use it. Nani's heart skipped a beat and she subconsciously touched the chain around her neck. Only Father and Big Brother knew about this thing. How could he tell so easily? As if sensing her hesitation, the other party continued. You have to know that without my help, you won't be able to get out even if you're trapped here for more than 100 years. These words finally made Nani make up her mind. She gritted her teeth. Okay. I'll help you. However, you have to keep your promise to me. As she spoke, she finally took off the chain around her neck. It was an ordinary-looking silver chain. It was very thin and decorated with a fingernail-sized ruby. It was dark red in color and pure in texture. Even if an ordinary person saw it, they would only think that it was an ordinary ruby necklace. Nan Yi held the ruby in her hand and closed her eyes. Soon, a totem flashed between her brows. A short sword suddenly flew out from the ruby. Its entire body was bright and extremely sharp. Nan Yi grabbed the short sword and dug it into the ground. A deep mark quickly appeared on the ground. Nan Yi didn't stop. After a while, the ground around the bone completely loosened. Swoosh! The bones suddenly darted out. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1701. Before Nan Yi could react, she suddenly felt a strong force attacking her. Immediately after, her body fell forward uncontrollably. At this moment, the darkness in front of her was suddenly cut open by a white light. She subconsciously closed her eyes. At this moment, her body suddenly fell. Outside the Scarlet Soul Forest. In the void, a few ripples suddenly spread out rapidly. Immediately after, a few figures walked out one after another. The person in front was dressed in a dark purple robe and had a cold expression. It was the head of the Nan family, Nan Yifan. Behind him were 4 elders of the family. As soon as he arrived, Nan Yifan quickly scanned the surroundings and frowned. He sensed the aura of Nan Yi and the others. After looking for a while, he lifted his foot and walked towards a certain place in the Scarlet Soul Forest. They should have entered the Scarlet Soul Forest from here. The elders behind him hurriedly followed. Because they knew that this matter involved Nan Yuxing and Nan Yi, they didn't dare to say anything in front of Nan Yifan. They would do whatever he said. The few of them quickly rushed over. However, just as Nan Yifan and the others were about to enter, there was a sudden fluctuation behind them. They immediately looked back and were on high alert. Who would come to the Godslayer tomb at this time? And it was the same place as them. A black spatial crack was suddenly torn open. Then, 2 figures walked out one after another. When he saw the faces of the people who came, Nan Yifan was stunned. Wasn't this the head of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, Yi Zhao, and one of the 5 elders, Elder Yu? The Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan almost never interacted with the human race. The reason why Nan Yifan could recognize them at a glance was because he had met them by chance in the past. Although it was only a one-time encounter, he had always remembered them clearly. So now that he saw these 2 familiar faces, he immediately remembered. Nan Yifan's hanging heart relaxed slightly, but at the same time, more questions arose. Why did they suddenly come to this place? There was no need to mention Elder Yu, but Yi Zhao rarely left the Phoenix God Mountain. Today, they had actually appeared together in the Scarlet Soul Forest outside the God-slaying tomb. It was hard not to overthink. However, no matter how he felt in his heart, he still had to put on a show. Nan Yifan quickly adjusted his expression, took a step forward, cupped his hands politely, and said with a smile, isn't this Patriarch Yi Zhao? What wind blew you here? Compared to his enthusiasm, Yi Zhao's attitude was much colder. He only glanced at Nan Yifan indifferently, then quickly retracted his gaze, as if he had not seen this person at all. He only turned his head and said to Elder Yu, they should have entered from here. Elder Yu nodded. Of course, they would not mistake Dumpling's aura. But why would I bump into someone from the Nan family here? He looked in that direction out of the corner of his eye, but did not respond to Nan Yifan's words. What a joke, the patriarch had always been blunt with the human clan. Now that Dumpling had an accident, time was even more pressing. How could he be in the mood to exchange pleasantries with Nan Yifan? Yi Zhao Duo's attitude made Nan Yifan very embarrassed. The smile on his face stiffened for a moment, but soon returned to normal. In fact, he had expected such a reaction from the other party. After so many years, which of the two great ancient mythological beasts did not have their eyes on the top of their heads and were extremely arrogant? Although he was not convinced, the other party had such confidence, so he had to admit it. Nan Yifan had a noble status and was strong himself. For many years, it was almost always others who looked at him with disdain. There weren't many situations like this where he tried to curry favor with others and was even rejected by them. If it were someone else, they might have been lying on the ground. But the other party was Yi Zhao. He really could not afford to offend him. Nan Yifan swallowed his anger, pretended nothing had happened, and continued to ask. Patriarch Yi Zhao, are you also here to look for someone? These words attracted Elder Yi Yu's attention. He raised his eyebrows. Also? Nan Yifan's heart tightened and he suddenly felt that he had misspoken. He had unconsciously said, also. But thinking of the other party's identity, this matter did not seem to be a taboo. So what if they knew? Would Yi Zhao meddle in the affairs of the human clan? After thinking for a moment, Nan Yifan said frankly, yes, my daughter came to the god-slaying tomb some time ago, but there was suddenly no news of her today. I was worried, so I wanted to come over and take a look myself. He only mentioned Nan Yi and did not mention Nan Yuxing and the others. This was a serious matter. If the news of Nan Yuxing's accident also spread, the Nan family would probably be in chaos. Anyway, everyone knew that he had always doted on Nan Yi, so it was normal for him to make a special trip here for her. A look of understanding flashed across Elder Yi Yu's eyes, but he did not reply. Nan Yifan could not help but ask, may I know who the two of you are here to look for? The god-slaying tomb is vast and full of danger. If we join forces, we might be able to find her faster. Yes, he wanted to join forces with Yi Zhao. Although the other party was few in number, they were powerful. Moreover, it would be even better if he could use this opportunity to get closer to the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. He had wishful thinking, but Yi Zhao was not interested at all. He didn't even spare her a glance, and with a cold and solemn expression on his face, he lifted his foot and walked towards the Scarlet Soul Forest. Nan Yifan was rebuffed, and his face was also a little embarrassed. But Yi Zhao was famous for his bad temper and arrogance. Even if he was angry, he did not dare to do anything to him. Besides, the most important thing now was to find Nan Yi and the others. Behind him, several elders secretly exchanged glances and did not dare to breathe loudly. Nan Yifan clenched his fists and took a deep breath. All right, let's hurry up. After saying that, he lifted his foot and walked forward. As they walked, they all sensed that something was wrong. Nan Yifan's expression became more and more strange, and his footsteps became hesitant. This direction. Why was it the same as Yi Zhao and the others? Almost at the same time, Elder Yi Yu also turned around and looked at Nan Yifan with a faint smile. Patriarch Nan, if you want to find someone, go ahead. Why do you have to go with us? Nan Yifan felt embarrassed and braced himself to explain. Elder Yi Yu, it's really a misunderstanding. We didn't mean to follow you, but my daughter and the others seem to have entered the god-slaying tomb from here, so. Seeing that he did not seem to be lying, Elder Yi Yu glanced at Yi Zhao hesitantly. The Crimson Soul Forest was so big. Where could they not enter from? This was too much of a coincidence, wasn't it? Nan Yifan immediately realized something when he saw this reaction. Patriarch Yi Zhao, maybe the person you are looking for went in with Yi and the others. There was a trace of excitement in his expression. I think it's more convenient for us to move together, don't you think? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1702. Yi Zhao frowned slightly. After a moment, he continued to walk forward without saying anything. Elder Yi Yu was best at guessing his thoughts and understood that this was a tacit agreement. Although they did not interact much with humans, the situation this time was a little special. Nan Yifan's words were not completely unreasonable. It was not that easy to quickly find Dumpling and the rest in this huge Godslayer mound. If the people they were looking for entered the Godslayer mound together, it might be faster. Elder Yu smiled. In that case, Patriarch Nan, please. Nan Yifan's eyes lit up. They agreed. He was just trying, but he did not expect them to really agree. This made Nan Yifan's originally anxious and uneasy heart feel a lot more comforted. The Nan family was indeed big and powerful. However, compared to the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, they were still inferior. Now that they could move together with Yi Zhao and the rest, it could be considered a friendship. Even in the entire Divine Ruins world, how many people could do that? Okay. Nan Yifan hurriedly responded and followed them. Originally, he wanted to go over and talk to Yi Zhao, but Elder Yu was in the middle and it was really difficult to communicate. Moreover, Yi Zhao's aura was heavy and ordinary people could not even get close to him. Nan Yifan saw that his expression was cold and did not seem to be in a good mood. After thinking about it, he tactfully did not disturb him and just quietly followed a few steps away. They could not use force in the Crimson Soul Forest, so they naturally walked forward step by step. As they walked, Nan Yifan kept thinking in his heart. Who exactly did Yi Zhao and the rest come here to find? Although they hid it very well, Nan Yifan still saw the trace of worry in their eyes. They were definitely not here to seek revenge. It looked more like they were looking for someone important. Nan Yifan was even more puzzled. There were not many people in the world who could alarm Yi Zhao, right? He was probably an important person in the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Nan Yifan was nervous and uneasy, but there was also a trace of anticipation in his heart. Perhaps Yi and the others had really bumped into the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. If they really encountered some trouble together and went through difficulties together, their relationship might be able to take another step forward. Thinking of this, Nan Yifan's mood immediately relaxed a lot. He had never considered whether Nan Yi and the rest would offend the other party. What a joke. Even if she couldn't recognize the other party, Elder Wupang and the others were here, so they would definitely be able to see through the other party's identity. They couldn't wait to curry favor with the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix clan, so how could they possibly oppose the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix clan? However, things were often unpredictable. Nan Yifan couldn't have imagined what kind of cruel reality would await him. Suddenly, Yi Zhao stopped in his tracks and stared straight ahead. Nan Yifan had no choice but to stop as well. He tilted his head and followed his line of sight. What he saw made him frown. The forest not far ahead was a mess. It seemed that a fierce battle had broken out here. But this place was the Scarlet Soul Forest. Fighting here, wasn't it seeking death? Suddenly, an elder at the side exclaimed. Patriarch. That seems to be eldest young master's clothes. Nan Yifan was shocked and hurriedly took a few steps forward to take a closer look. When he saw the torn corners of the clothes scattered on the ground and the messy bloodstains, Nan Yifan's mind buzzed. It really was Yuxing's clothes. Did he fight here? But he clearly knew that he couldn't use force in the Scarlet Soul Forest. How could he have caused such a big trouble for himself? The few scarlet leaves scattered on the ground dispelled Nan Yifan's last hope. There were no fallen leaves in the entire Scarlet Soul Forest. Only this place had them. Something must have happened. Patriarch, don't be anxious. Maybe this blood isn't eldest young master's? Eldest young master is powerful, and Elder Wupang and the others are accompanying him. He'll definitely be fine. Nan Yifan clenched his fists. Nan Yuxing and the rest were indeed not in danger, but judging from the situation, they must have been injured. He just didn't know what had happened to cause such a situation. Elder Yu touched his chin. Patriarch, this bloodstain doesn't have Dumpling's aura. Yi Zhao nodded. This scarlet soul forest might be very dangerous to humans, but it wasn't a threat to Dumpling. It would be strange if she was injured here. Most likely, she met with trouble after entering the god-slaying mound. Yi Zhao glanced at the mess on the ground expressionlessly before continuing to walk forward. He naturally wouldn't care too much about irrelevant people and things. Nan Yifan clenched his fists and finally shifted his gaze away and followed him. They weren't here. The most important thing now was to enter the god-slaying mound and find their traces. The place where they found the bloodstain was actually at the edge of the Scarlet Soul Forest. They just needed to walk forward a little more and they would be out. Unfortunately, something happened to Nan Yuxing and the rest. Nan Yifan felt depressed and his face became gloomier. After a while, the group finally walked out of the Scarlet Soul Forest in silence. The view in front of them suddenly widened. The sky was gray with thick layers of clouds. Looking into the distance, there was an endless plain. A cold and gloomy aura instantly hit them in the face. Faintly, one could smell a trace of desolate blood. Nan Yifan's heart skipped a beat. Behind him, an elder couldn't help but ask in a low voice. Chapter 1703. Time passed silently. Chu Luiyue held a transparent music score tightly in her hands. The dazzling light on it almost dazzled her eyes. From the beginning until now, she had not stopped at all and looked at it one by one. The force in her body was also being consumed rapidly in this process. However, every time her force was exhausted, the transparent remnant page in her dantian would surge with more force and pour into her limbs and bones. This was the force that she had been accumulating over the years. With the support of this force, Chu Luiyue was able to hold on until now. Moreover, when this force flowed through her body, it was like a surging river that constantly washed her flesh and bones. Imperceptibly, her physical body was becoming stronger and stronger with each tempering. In other words, on the whole, Chu Luiyue's strength was actually increasing all the time. However, this process was too painful and torturous. Every time her energy was exhausted, she felt like a fish on the verge of death, struggling desperately. After receiving the support of this new force, this pain would slowly lessen. However, this would not last for long because this force would still be consumed quickly. Therefore, a new cycle began again. Again and again, over and over again. Chu Luiyue could not remember how many times she had gone through this extreme process. Moreover, all of this was still going on, and there was no sign of it stopping. Needless to say, the chilling sound of the zither was still lingering in her ears. To anyone, this was an extremely torturous experience. If one's mind was not firm enough, perhaps they would have already been defeated. Chu Luiyue could only rely on her last bit of willpower to grit her teeth and persevere. On the surface, she seemed to be no different from before. She was still fine from head to toe, except for a little blood stain at the corner of her mouth, which was not eye-catching. However, in reality, the inside of her body had already been turned upside down. And in her mind, she was experiencing a terrible storm. The sound of the zither kept reverberating in her ears, as if she could see corpses everywhere, and the smell of blood filling the sky. The blood in Chu Luiyue's body also seemed to be boiling. Her body began to tremble slightly, and the music score in her hand fell. Clang! The sound of the zither suddenly stopped. Jing looked at her and asked calmly, "Do you want to take a break?" She was already at her limit. Chu Luiyue said slowly and firmly. No, no need. Her voice was very weak, but it carried a hint of persistence. Then, she picked up the music score that had fallen to the ground. Even though her hands were trembling, she still held it tightly, her knuckles turning white. Jing's hand gently pressed on the strings of the zither. He smiled and said, "Actually, you don't have to force yourself like this. It was no big deal to rest for a while. It was a man who looked to be in his 40s. He was thin and had an ordinary face. He was the kind of existence that no one would remember after a glance. However, when his gaze swept over, Nanny suddenly felt a chill all over her body. An indescribable cold fear suddenly rose from the bottom of her heart. With just one look, she was certain that this man was definitely not to be trifled with. "Why, you're the person who spoke to me just now?" Nanny asked nervously. The middle-aged man did not answer this meaningless question. He only sized her up and said indifferently, "Name." Nanny was stunned for a moment before she realized that he was asking for her name. Seeing that the other party didn't seem to have any intention of attacking her, she said hesitantly, "Nan. Nanny, you're from the Nan family." The man looked enlightened. "No wonder you have such a treasure on you." Nanny heaved a sigh of relief when she heard that the other party knew about her family background. In this case, he should have some scruples and wouldn't attack casually, right? "Don't worry, since I promised to bring you out, I won't go back on my word." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. If it's really that easy, why would I be trapped here for over 1,000 years? Wasn't she a little? Nanny could hear the mockery in his words. Her face heated up and she felt very embarrassed. Simply speaking, this is a huge. There are countless paths that divide this place into countless spaces, but there is only one path that leads out of this place. He glanced at Nanny. "You didn't come in alone, right?" His status was not low, and his talent was not bad. Unfortunately, it was not enough in this place. The Nan family would never let her come alone. Nanny nodded hesitantly. Then, she suddenly raised her head and looked at the other party expectantly. "Senior, my big brother and the rest are here too. Can you help me find, no?" Before Nanny could finish speaking, the man interrupted her indifferently and gave a firm negative answer. Nanny choked. I can give you a generous reward. As long as you are willing to help, we will definitely reward you greatly after we get out." The man glanced at her with undisguised sarcasm and arrogance. "Do you know how much space there is here? Even if they came in with you, they aren't in the same place as you, right? Do you think it's so easy to find someone here? You have to know that even if they are next to you and are only separated by a wall, it's extremely difficult for you to see them. I promised to bring you out, but I didn't say that I would help others." The other party's tone was firm and cold. Nanny's heart, which was originally full of hope, gradually sank. "If you still want to go out, follow behind me quietly for the rest of the time." Nanny's nails dug into her palms and she lowered her eyes. "I understand." Yi Zhao and the rest were still walking on the wasteland. Because he was worried about Dumpling and Chu Luyue, he and Elder Yu were very fast. This made the people behind them suffer. Nan Yifan was still fine, but the two elders behind him were obviously starting to be unable to keep up. Their faces gradually turned pale and their foreheads were already covered in fine beads of sweat. Nan Yifan couldn't help but frown when he saw this scene. He then glanced at Yi Zhao and Elder Yu. As expected of the pure gold heavenly phoenix. This kind of strength was truly peerless. The few of them were actually not weak, but in front of Yi Zhao and the rest, they were still not worth mentioning. The two of them didn't even have the slightest change in expression and looked extremely relaxed. Looking at them, the comparison was really tragic. Nan Yifan's mood became very complicated. As one of the two ancient divine beasts, the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan had always been very arrogant. As the clan leader, Yi Zhao was even more so. He had almost no contact with the human race for many years. When he first saw Yi Zhao and the rest, Nan Yifan was polite and respectful on the surface, but he was still a little unconvinced in his heart. Chapter 1705. Elder Yu narrowed his eyes and looked in the direction Yi Zhao was pointing. He was slightly stunned. In the distance, in the vast wilderness, there were countless messy and broken tombstones. Even though there was still some distance between them, they could still clearly feel the dense and cold aura of suppression from where they were standing. Oppressive. Heavy. Majestic. The air was filled with a desolate and thick smell of blood. It was frightening. This is the tombs of the exalted gods. Elder Yu murmured. Clan leader, do you mean? Yi Zhao raised his chin. No, look again. Elder Yu was stunned for a moment before he looked even further into the distance. Only then did he see that there seemed to be an unusual black color at the point where the sky and the earth met. That's a wall. Elder Yu widened his eyes. Hearing his words, Nan Yifan and the others immediately looked in that direction. However, their eyesight was not as good as Elder Yu's. They could not compare to Yi Zhao's, so they could only see a black line. However, Nan Yifan's face was still filled with shock. There was indeed a wall in the divine ruins world. Rumor had it that it appeared in the earth-shattering battle tens of thousands of years ago. It was said that the wall contained endless power and could separate heaven and earth. All the cultivators who participated in the battle back then died, and countless treasures were destroyed. Only this wall was strong and sturdy and had been preserved. Before this, Nan Yifan had only heard of the existence of this wall in rumors. He had never seen it before. Therefore, when he saw it from afar, he could not hide his excitement. However, Yi Zhao's next sentence made his heart turn cold. They should be inside. The moment he said that, the surroundings fell silent. Inside? What inside? The few of them looked at each other blankly. They saw the confusion, suspicion, and disbelief in each other's eyes. Although Elder Yu was not as shocked as Nan Yifan and the others, he also frowned. You're saying, they're inside that wall? Yi Zhao nodded. How is that possible? Nan Yifan finally had no one to stop him from speaking. Clan leader Yi Zhao, are you saying that they are behind that wall? How could a perfectly good wall contain people? Moreover, the reason why this wall was so famous was because it was exceptionally sturdy. Not only did it not collapse during the bloody battle back then, it even stood tenaciously between heaven and earth after experiencing tens of thousands of years of wind, frost, and rain. It would be difficult for an average person to even leave a hole in the wall, let alone others. Wasn't this too strange? Yi Zhao didn't even look at him, as if he hadn't heard his question at all. He walked straight to the wall. Elder Yu immediately followed after him. However, the smile on his face had already disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by a rare solemn and serious expression. Nan Yifan didn't get an answer, but he didn't have time to feel aggrieved. This was because he could tell that Yi Zhao and Yu Yuehan seemed to be a little nervous. I'm afraid things are going to get troublesome. Nan Yifan's heart also hung in the air. If the person Yi Zhao and the others were looking for was trapped in that wall, then, would Yi and the others also? This thought made him feel a strong sense of uneasiness. He took a deep breath and waved at them. Follow me. The tombs of the exalted God were silent. Yi Zhao and the others passed through in silence. The process was long and torturous. Moreover, the closer they got, the more they could feel the astonishing pressure and evil aura. The tombs of the exalted God should be in front. Elder Yu whispered. The wall was in the tombs of the exalted God. The further they went, the closer they got to the wall. Naturally, they could see it more clearly. Nan Yifan gritted his teeth and walked, staring straight at the black wall in front of him that was getting clearer. The wall was extremely tall and stood there quietly. He couldn't see the end of it on either side. He didn't know how long this wall was. Why hadn't he seen it before when he came here? Plop. A muffled voice came from behind. Nan Yifan turned around to look. One of the elders who came with him fell to the ground with a pale face. Ma, patriarch. Before he could finish his sentence, his chest shook and he spat out a mouthful of blood. The bloodstains were dark red, making his face look even more haggard and miserable. Nan Yifan's face darkened. An elder next to him couldn't help but say, Patriarch, the evil aura on the wall is too terrifying. I'm afraid Elder Jiming can't hold on. And I'm afraid the rest of us will also. This wasn't an insult, but it was the truth. They knew each other's strength the best. They had already come this far, and no one wanted to stop here. If it wasn't for the fact that they had no other choice, they wouldn't have. Nan Yifan closed his eyes and said, You and Elder Jiming stay here and wait. Don't go any further. The road ahead was dangerous, and he couldn't gamble with his elder's life. The two elders were hesitant at first, but in the end, they chose to nod and agree. They knew that they were at the end of their rope. If they forced themselves to follow, they would only be a burden. Patriarch, you must be careful. Nan Yifan didn't delay for too long. He gave a few words of advice and turned to leave, continuing to follow Yi Zhao and Elder Jiming. They walked forward for a while more before finally arriving in front of the wall. Yi Zhao stopped in his tracks and stared fixedly ahead with a deep gaze. Elder Yi Yu frowned. The situation was worse than he had expected. When Nan Yifan caught up, he immediately noticed the low pressure around the two. His heart sank as well. After waiting for a while, seeing that Yi Zhao and Elder Jiming still had no intention of speaking or taking action, Nan Yifan finally spoke hesitantly. Patriarch Yi Zhao, are you sure that the person you're looking for is inside? Elder Yi Yu put his hands behind his back and said indifferently, Patriarch Nan, your daughter and the others should be inside too. Nan Yifan was shocked. This. How did you? This wall can isolate all auras. Anyone who enters will lose contact with the outside world. A look of horror flashed across Nan Yifan's eyes. He really didn't know about this. He looked at the black wall in front of him again. It was tall, heavy, and majestic. After weathering the wind and frost, the wall was mottled, and the biting cold murderous aura kept gushing out from it, almost unbearable. They were still outside, but it was already so unbearable. If they really entered, wouldn't it be even more dangerous? Then we have to get them out quickly. Nan Yifan said nervously. Elder Yi Yu suddenly laughed, but there wasn't any smile on his face. He turned his head and glanced at Nan Yifan. Patriarch Nan, do you know how many people have been trapped here for tens of thousands of years? Nan Yifan looked at him, and a strong sense of uneasiness suddenly surged in his heart. Elder Yi Yu said indifferently, not a single one. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Is it going to open? But their expectant faces looked as the huge totem on the black wall suddenly started to rotate slowly. That was where the sound came from. Almost at the same time, the flame in Yi Zhao's palms suddenly extinguished. Then, a gust of wind swept out. Yi Zhao was shocked, and his aura rose rapidly. In an instant, a gust of wind swept out. Dust flew everywhere. A tyrannical and terrifying force swept over. Yi Zhao was Yi Zhao after all. In the end, he still managed to stabilize his body in this terrifying storm. However, the ground beneath his feet had already cracked open several times. His feet had sunk half an inch into the ground. Elder Yi Yu, who was at the back, suffered less of the impact, but he also managed to stand still in his position with difficulty. Nan Yifan and the rest were not in such a good situation. Their strength was inferior to Elder Yi Yu's to begin with. Furthermore, they were not completely prepared when the accident occurred. Thus, their figures were sent flying just like that. However, they were all human powerhouses with rich combat experience after all. After suffering the initial loss, they reacted in time and tried their best to stabilize their bodies. But at this time, they had already retreated a distance away from the black wall. But this was not the most worrisome thing. Because Yi Zhao's situation did not look good. Although he was still standing on the spot and refused to retreat, as the totem on the black wall slowly rotated, the power erupting from it became more and more terrifying. Crack! The cracks in the ground under Yi Zhao's feet began to spread further away. Half of Nan Yifan's heart turned cold. Yi Zhao was the patriarch of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. If even he couldn't do it, then, wouldn't the people trapped inside really be hopeless? Nan Yi walked in the dark and winding space. 5 steps in front of her, a translucent figure was walking forward unhurriedly. The surroundings were deathly silent, and she could only hear her own footsteps. The man in front didn't speak, and she didn't dare to ask anything. She could only follow behind carefully. Fortunately, this man seemed to really know the way out. Along the way, their progress was very smooth. Not only did they not encounter any more danger, but the faintly discernible light in front of them seemed to be getting clearer and clearer. This gave Nan Yi hope. Perhaps, following this man would really be able to get out of here. Although she was also very worried about Big Brother and the rest, she could only care about herself now. After thinking about it, she finally decided to think of a way after getting out of here. Uncle Luo Yan was nowhere to be seen here, and his contact with her father had been cut off. She couldn't even ask for help. Nan Yi was thinking about it when she suddenly realized that the man in front of her had stopped. She thought that he wanted to confirm the direction, so she obediently stopped in her tracks and waited obediently. However, after a while, the person in front still didn't move. Nan Yi opened her mouth, wanting to ask about it. However, the sound of footsteps suddenly fell into her ears. There was someone. Nan Yi's heart skipped a beat, and she hurriedly looked over. On the side, a figure was slowly walking out from the darkness. Although the surroundings were dark, when that person walked closer, she could still vaguely see his appearance. As that person continued to approach, she could clearly feel that the surrounding atmosphere was rapidly becoming stiff and cold. The air seemed to be freezing inch by inch. A heavy and oppressive aura quickly spread. When she saw that person's face clearly, Nan Yi covered her mouth with one hand. At the same time, her eyes widened in shock. How could it be? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1707. What a coincidence. That person stood rooted to the ground and said indifferently, "I didn't expect to meet you here." Nan Yi's heart seemed to be gripped tightly by something. She was about to speak when she suddenly heard the man in front of her laugh and say, "It's a coincidence. You actually came here one day." Nan Yi was stunned. Only then did she realize that the other party's words were not meant for her. She furrowed her brows and glanced at the two of them with confusion and suspicion. They knew each other. That shouldn't be the case. She recognized the man in front of her. He was with Sheng Guanyu back then. He seemed to be some relative of Sheng Guanyu. Nan Yi wasn't shocked that he would appear here. At that time, everyone had been swallowed and entered this place. It was at most an accident and coincidence that they had met. But, how did he know this man who was with her? The latter had been locked up here for 1,000 years. The man in front of her continued. Actually, what surprised me even more is that you're still alive. His voice sounded very calm at first, but if one thought about it carefully, they would realize that he seemed to be suppressing something. Nan Yi couldn't describe this feeling. Sheng Guanjing smiled as well. I should be the one saying this to you. You're the one who's truly tough. You've been trapped here for so long, but you're still struggling at death's door. As soon as he finished speaking, Nanyi suddenly felt a strong murderous intent. But this murderous intent only flashed past. By the time Nanyi came to her senses, the cold and sinister feeling had already disappeared. It was as if everything was just her imagination. Shangguan Jing's gaze swept past Nanyi. His eyes seemed to have seen through everything. Looks like you helped him. Nanyi, I'm afraid you still don't know what kind of person you helped, right? Nanyi inexplicably felt guilty and nervous. She subconsciously glanced at the man in front of her. Why did his words sound so strange? Could it be that this man's identity was extraordinary, or was there something fishy? Shangguan Jing, the feud between us has already been settled back then. Let's mind our own business now. You can do whatever you want, but don't stop me from leaving. Otherwise, I won't be polite. This was the first time Nanyi had heard such threatening words from the man in front of her. Shangguan Jing laughed out loud as if he had heard a joke. After a long while, he said, "Yu Hongshan. What else can you do to me? Based on the fact that you don't even have a physical body and are just a remnant soul. How laughable." Back then, Yu Hongshan's strength had already been inferior to his, and he had only managed to fight him to a draw by relying on various schemes and tricks. After that fierce battle, Shangguan Jing was wounded and went to the north of the untainted wilderness. Yu Hongshan, on the other hand, was swallowed into the space of the black wall and could not come out for 1,000 years. In fact, neither of them had expected the other to be able to survive until now. Even more so, they didn't expect to meet each other here. Yu Hongshan's aura surged. Clearly, he was enraged. His voice was cold. Shangguan Jing, do you think I'm still the old me? As soon as he finished speaking, a majestic aura burst out from his body. Shangguan Jing narrowed his eyes and smiled. I was wondering why you were so arrogant. It turns out that you've broken through to become a god. This was indeed rare. It was almost impossible to break through from a high god to a god without a physical body. No wonder he was so arrogant. It was obvious that Yu Hongshan had put in a lot of effort in this aspect over the past 1,000 years. Or perhaps, he had encountered some fortuitous opportunity here. However, Shangguan Jing didn't care. His feet slightly staggered, and the aura on his body rapidly became dangerous. In that case, I'll have a good fight with you. Seeing that Shangguan Jing was really going to fight here, Yu Hongshan's face twisted for a moment. He had only said those words to intimidate Shangguan Jing. He didn't really want to fight him. He wasn't afraid of Shangguan Jing. What he wanted to do the most right now was to get out of here. It wouldn't be too late to fight after he got out. However, Shangguan Jing didn't seem to have that intention. Yu Hongshan suppressed his anger and said coldly, Shangguan Jing, you've been here for a while. Shangguan Jing, you've been here for a while. You should be aware of the danger here. If you really want to fight, sure. We'll talk after we get out. If you want to die here, don't drag others down with you. Shangguan Jing narrowed his eyes. Although he didn't really believe Yu Hongshan's words, he did realize that there was something strange about this place along the way. You and the others must have been forcefully devoured and brought here. Unfortunately, he couldn't find them even after searching for a long time. Suddenly, his expression changed slightly as he looked Yu Hongshan up and down. Do you know how to get out? Yu Hongshan didn't say anything. He had been trapped here for 1,000 years. Although he hadn't been able to leave that place, he still had a good understanding of this place. Of course, he knew how to get out. Otherwise, he wouldn't have tried so hard to get Nanyi to help him. He was silent for a long time before saying, as long as you promise that you won't fight before we get out, I can take you out of here. Nanyi was shocked. Senior, how can I do that? This Shangguan Jing was in cahoots with Shangguan Yu and the others. She couldn't wait for him to stay here forever and die here. How could she take him out? Yu Hongshan turned his head halfway and looked at her with an extremely cold gaze. Shut up if you don't want to die. Nan Yi was stunned by the reprimand. However, due to the other party's pressure, she didn't dare to make a fuss. She could only grit her teeth and swallow the rest of her words. She still had to get out. After leaving this place, she wouldn't have to be threatened by these people anymore. Yu Hongshan looked at Shangguan Jing again, waiting for his answer. Shangguan Jing crossed his arms and frowned, as if he was deep in thought. But Yu Hongshan wasn't in a hurry at all. As long as there was nothing wrong with Shangguan Jing's brain, he would definitely agree to his suggestion. After a moment, Shangguan Jing finally spoke. Since you know how to get out, Yu Hongshan waited calmly. Then, you definitely know how to find the others. Yu Hongshan's expression froze when he heard this. He said gloomily. Shangguan Jing, what do you mean? Shangguan Jing laughed. Nothing much. I just hope that you can help me find you, and the others. Then, we can go out together. After all, you and I are acquaintances. You won't be unwilling to help me with such a small favor, right? Shangguan Jing. Yu Hongshan suddenly raised his voice. Shangguan Jing's smile didn't change as he raised his hand. Please. Chu Luiyue was still focused on the zither score in her hand. She didn't remember how much she had read, but the number of zither scores hanging around her had obviously decreased by a lot. And during this process, she read faster and faster. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1708. Chu Luiyue had listened to that tune many times. She was extremely intelligent. She could remember almost everything that she had seen or heard. But because this was not an ordinary score, she still could not memorize it completely even though she had listened to it many times. Every syllable seemed to be wonderful and bouncing in her ears. The sound of the zither brushed past her ears and passed through her mind, but it only left behind a very faint trace. So, Chu Luiyue could only memorize it bit by bit, and then compare it with the score in her hands to distinguish the real from the fake. She did not know if it was because she had gotten used to it, but she gradually became numb to the pain all over her body. This allowed her to divert more energy to focus on the score. Jing's hands paused, and he tilted his head slightly. As far as his eyes could see, it was a thick black. So noisy, he muttered in a low voice, and there was a trace of impatience in his tone. He had never been a patient person. But most of the time, he was too lazy to care, so he turned a blind eye and let it pass. But now was not the time. He had waited for so long, and finally Chu Luiyue came. It was not easy to get his cultivation on the right track. How could he be disturbed? His well-defined fingers moved gently, and a light blade flew out in an instant. And he did all this silently. Chu Luiyue, who was focused on the score, did not notice. Boom! With a violent sound, a ball of fire suddenly exploded in front of Yi Zhao. He tipped his toes and quickly retreated. Violent energy swept out in all directions, and there were even scorch marks on the ground. Nan Yifan and the others retreated again. After a while, the force finally subsided. Smoke and dust filled the air, and there was still the smell of something burning in the air. Hot and anxious. Nan Yifan let go of his hand, and his palm was already wet with sweat. Just now, it was too scary. Yi Zhao and the force of the black wall were fighting head-on, and the two sides were fighting fiercely. Just by standing there, they could feel the terrible heat that would rush toward them in the next second. If it were them, they would not even be able to hold on for a third of the time. Patriarch, how are you? Elder Yi Yu quickly rushed to Yi Zhao's side, a rare look of nervousness on his face. Yi Xiao shook his head. I'm fine, but this wall has been completely sealed off by an extremely ferocious force. I'm afraid it will be difficult to force our way in from the outside. Elder Yi Yu had actually already expected this outcome. However, when he saw Yi Xiao's grave expression, his heart unconsciously sank. If even the patriarch had said so, if that was the case, then there was really no way out of this matter. But Dumpling and the others were still inside. They couldn't just let it go like this, could they? Yi Xiao was silent for a moment. At this time, the two elders behind him had also rushed over. They were calmer than Nanny Fan. Master, let's treat second miss first. One of the elders reminded him. Nanny Fan came to his senses and hurriedly took out a green jade bottle. He poured out a pill and carefully fed it to Nanny Yi. This is a golden origin pill. Yi, take it quickly. From the sound of the jade bottle, there should be a few more pills in it. The golden origin pill was a top-notch pill that only a supremacy doctor could refine. It had a miraculous effect on stopping bleeding, treating injuries, and recovering the body. Even for many first-rate aristocratic families, this thing was very precious, but in Nan Yifan's place, it was easily a bottle. It was obvious that he was rich. Nan Yi swallowed the golden origin pill and felt a warm energy surge through her body. Her pale face also had a hint of rosy color. Only then did Nan Yifan carefully help her up. What exactly is going on? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1709. Nan Yifan asked anxiously. Nan Yi took a deep breath, but she didn't answer his question immediately. Instead, she turned around first. After her, there was no one else. Was she the only one who came out? Seeing that she didn't answer, Nan Yifan was a little anxious. Only then did Nan Yi retract her gaze. Everything that happened just now quickly flashed through her mind. After Sheng Wanjing said that, Yu Hongshan was annoyed. As if knowing that there was no need to continue the discussion, Yu Hongshan finally chose to make a move. The two of them started fighting just like that. Although Nan Yi had tried her best to avoid them, that place was narrow and the two of them were powerful. In the fierce battle, she was inevitably affected. Some of the injuries on her body were from that time. But this wasn't fatal. After all, she was still a high god and had treasures to protect herself. But unexpectedly, not long after, the surrounding space began to distort, and at the same time, countless light blades flew over from all directions. Her little bit of strength was simply not enough at this time. She only felt as if her body had been ruthlessly crushed by an invisible force, and her bones and tendons were almost shattered. And those light blades, one after another, ruthlessly scraped against her body. Countless ghastly scars were left behind. She originally thought that she was going to die, but who knew that she actually came out alive? Unfortunately, in the end, her mind was in a mess and she couldn't remember anything. He couldn't even remember how he got out of there. As for Yu Hongshan and Sheng Wanjing, she seemed to have lost contact with them halfway, so she naturally didn't know their whereabouts at this time. Nan Yi sorted out everything in her mind before she suppressed her sobs and said, "What's wrong?" "Father, Yi thought that I would never see you again." The Nan family followed the rules. When there were other people around, she basically called Nan Yifan father or the head of the family. At this moment, she was calling him father with red eyes. It was obvious that she had suffered a great shock and grievance. Nan Yifan's heart skipped a beat when he heard that, and his heart ached even more. Don't worry. You're safe now. With me around, I won't let you fall into danger again. I and the elders will definitely protect you well. Nan Yi sobbed for a while before she gradually calmed down under Nan Yifan's comfort. Seeing that she had finally stopped crying and her body seemed to be getting better, Nan Yifan couldn't help but ask, "You're out. Where are your brothers?" Nan Yi wiped her tears and said in a hoarse voice, "Earlier, big brother, 2 elders, and I were all sucked into that black wall. But after we went in, we split up. I looked for them for a long time, but I couldn't find them." As she spoke, her eyes filled with tears again, making Nan Yifan's heart ache even more. This was a top-notch big shot that only existed in rumors. It was said that even venerables were rejected when they went to seek an audience. Arrogant, domineering. This was the impression that most cultivators in the Divine Ruins world had of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. And as the clan leader, Yi Zhao was even more so. Nan Yi had never expected that she would meet such a person here. No wonder even father was so polite. Nan Yi hurriedly bowed. "Junior Nan Yi greets, let me ask you, where is the person you mentioned just now?" Yi Zhao couldn't be bothered to beat around the bush with her and went straight to the point. Nan Yi was stunned for a moment before she quickly glanced at Yi Zhao. His expression didn't look good. But he obviously knew Sheng Wanyu. That's right. Sheng Wanyu had contracted a Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix. As the clan leader, how could Yi Zhao not know about it? He was most likely here to find trouble with Sheng Wanyu. To contract a Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix. He must be tired of living. Look, even their clan leader was alarmed. At this thought, Nan Yi's thoughts turned and she asked. "Clan leader Yi Zhao, are you looking for that B*TCH2? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network." Chapter 17:10. As soon as she said that, Elder Yu's eyes turned cold. This young lady looked weak, but he didn't expect her to be so rude. She actually called Sheng Wanyu a B*TCH directly. Just as he was about to reprimand him, Yi Zhao suddenly glanced at him without batting an eyelid and stopped him. Elder Yu choked and his Adam's apple bobbed a few times. In the end, he swallowed his words. The undercurrent between the two of them was very subtle and Nan Yi didn't notice it. However, Nan Yifan saw all of this. He couldn't understand Yi Zhao and Nan Yifan's expressions, but when he thought of their previous reactions, he couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. Weren't they here to look for their clansmen? Why did they suddenly say that they were looking for Sheng Wanyu now? He didn't know what Sheng Wanyu's relationship with them, but it was a little rash for Nan Yi to speak like this. He slightly emphasized his tone, hinting at a reminder. Nan Yi glanced at him, but didn't take his warning to heart. It seemed that father still didn't know that Sheng Wanyu had contracted a Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix, right? "Father, don't worry. I know what I'm doing." She carelessly gave him a word of advice before turning her head away. Nan Yifan wanted to say something, but seeing the subtle atmosphere, he shut his mouth in the end. Yi Zhao looked at Nan Yi from head to toe. His gaze was substantial and carried a heavy pressure. Nan Yi couldn't help but feel timid. Just when she almost couldn't take it anymore, Yi Zhao finally retracted his gaze. Only then did Nan Yi feel relieved. That's right. Yi Zhao was still expressionless and unfathomable. "I'm indeed looking for her." Hearing his affirmative answer, Nan Yi was even more convinced of her previous guess. He must have found out about that contracted fiend, so he came all the way here. For a moment, Nan Yi felt smug and regretful. She was smug because after offending the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, Sheng Wanyu was definitely doomed. Unfortunately, she seemed to still be trapped in that black wall until now, and no one knew if she was dead or alive. If Sheng Wanyu was already dead inside, wouldn't she not be able to see her being tortured? She felt that it was a pity. She sighed and said, "I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. The only thing I can be sure of now is that she's still there." But I don't know if she's alive or dead or if she can come out in the end. Yi Zhao furrowed his brows quickly. Actually, this result was within his expectations. Previously, you said that everything was Sheng Guanyu's fault. What's going on? Tell me in detail. Yi Zhao's tone was calm and indifferent, yet it was noble and arrogant, and it caused others to unconsciously feel reverence and submission. Nanyi loosened and tightened her grip. This matter, we have to start from a few days ago. After that, Nanyi told him everything that had happened over the past few days. Of course, she ignored the few times she provoked them and took the initiative to find trouble with them. She emphasized how Sheng Guanyu was rude and attacked them forcefully. The most important thing was that Sheng Guanyu tried to kill her, but in the end, everyone was swallowed by the black wall. According to her, everything seemed to be caused by Sheng Guanyu. From the beginning to the end, she didn't even mention Rongxiu's name. When outsiders heard this, they would naturally think that Sheng Guanyu was an arrogant, domineering, unreasonable, selfish, and ruthless person. She was also the one who put everyone in a life-and-death situation. Elder Yu couldn't continue listening after hearing a few sentences. It wasn't like he hadn't interacted with that girl before. Nanyi's words were obviously not trustworthy. He didn't know how Sheng Guanyu had offended her. She was actually trying so hard to smear their name. It was as if she couldn't wait to kill them forever. Could it be that it was just because they were all swallowed by the black wall? That's it. After Nanyi finished speaking, she glanced at Yi Zhao carefully. Unfortunately, Yi Zhao's expression didn't change. Nanyi couldn't guess what he was thinking at this time. On the other hand, Nan Yifan and the others were shocked by her words. You're saying that Sheng Guanyu contracted a crimson gold heavenly phoenix? Nanyi nodded. I don't know what method Sheng Guanyu used. And that crimson gold heavenly phoenix is very obedient to her. Nan Yifan frowned. Since it's a contracted divine beast, it's normal. No wonder Nanyi dared to say so earlier. There was such a shocking secret behind it. The crimson gold heavenly phoenix was an ancient divine beast and had always been extremely arrogant. They didn't even bother to interact with humans, let alone contract. This was undoubtedly a stain on their entire race. It was no wonder that Yi Zhao would take action personally. He was so nervous previously because he was looking for the contracted crimson gold heavenly phoenix. But Nanyi suddenly thought of something and spoke hesitantly. There seems to be something wrong with that crimson gold heavenly phoenix. She can already transform into a human form, but she looks only 3 or 4 years old. Oh. Nan Yifan couldn't help but be shocked. The Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan could only transform into a human form after reaching adulthood, right? How could such a situation happen? In that case, that Sheng Guanyu did use some special method. He was puzzled and looked at Yi Zhao and Elder Yu inquisitively. Unfortunately, the other party was more thoughtful and unpredictable than him. Nan Yifan couldn't tell what they were thinking at this time. How did you come out? Yi Zhao suddenly asked. Now that his origin core had shattered, all of the origin power in his body was rapidly escaping out of his body. How could he not feel it? Nan Yuxing's face was expressionless. After a long while, the corners of his mouth twitched with difficulty. That's true, in fact, he had felt it long ago, but he still didn't dare to believe it. From the moment he was born, he was a proud son of heaven. Who would have thought that one day, his core of essence would shatter and he would become a cripple? To him, Nan Yifan, and Nan Yi who were present, this was undoubtedly a bolt from the blue. Big brother, Nan Yi hugged him and cried. However, Nan Yuxing didn't have any reaction. He stared blankly at the void for a long time before he closed his eyes. He originally thought that he would die in there, but who knew that coming out would be even worse than death. Nan Yifan clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white and the veins on his forehead bulged. Jin He, help him deal with his injuries first. Nan Yifan looked calm and composed, but his voice was already hoarse. He had high hopes for Nan Yuxing, and this was undoubtedly a wake-up call. However, he definitely couldn't break down in front of so many people. He couldn't even show too much abnormality. Elder Jin He responded and began to treat Nan Yuxing's injuries. His condition was much more serious than Nan Yi's. In addition to external injuries, internal injuries were even more difficult to treat. His core of essence had shattered. It was really fortunate that he was able to survive. Of course, Nan Yuxing obviously didn't want this fortune himself. He closed his eyes and his face was ashen. It was obvious that he no longer had any motivation to live. Elder Jin He was a little anxious and whispered to Nan Yi. Second Miss, eldest young master has no intention of living. I'm afraid it won't be good if this continues. Nan Yi wiped away her tears. Actually, if she was Big Brother, she probably didn't want to live anymore. But she couldn't just watch Big Brother die like this. She took a deep breath and leaned closer. Big Brother, we haven't taken revenge yet. You must persevere. Don't you want to see what will happen to that B*TCH who reduced us to such a state? Nan Yi gritted her teeth as she said these words. Every word carried a deep hatred and resentment that couldn't be dispelled. She blamed all of this on that one person. At the same time, she pointed all the spearheads at that person. Finally, those words managed to move Nan Yuxing. With great difficulty, he slowly opened his eyes. His originally lifeless and despairing eyes were gradually filled with deep hatred. That's right. All of this was that Sheng Guanyu's fault. If it wasn't for her, they wouldn't have been involved in that, and he wouldn't have become like this. His entire life had been ruined by the other party. Where is she? Nan Yuxing gritted his teeth and spat out a few words. It was as if as long as Chu Luiyue appeared in front of him now, he would immediately suck her blood and eat her flesh. Nan Yi cooperated with Elder Jin He to treat his injuries while comforting him. Big Brother, she hasn't come out yet. But since we've all come out, she will definitely come out too. When the time comes, we'll settle this score with her properly. Nan Yuxing held his breath. You're right, he had to live. He had to watch them suffer with his own eyes. With the support of this thought, Nan Yuxing actually managed to endure it. Everyone fell silent and began to wait. Who else would come out next? Elder Yu glanced at Nan Yuxing with a serious expression. He wasn't worried about Nan Yuxing, but, judging from Nan Yuxing's injuries, the situation inside was probably not optimistic. Moreover, 2 people from the Nan family had already come out, but Dumpling and the rest were still nowhere to be seen. He looked at Yi Zhao and realized that Yi Zhao was staring at the black wall with a strange expression. He was about to ask something when he suddenly heard Yi Zhao shout. Step back. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 17:12. Elder Yi Zhao didn't even think before he tapped the tip of his foot on the ground and flashed backwards. Immediately after, a ripple suddenly rose from the black wall. Whoosh, like a surging river, waves surging. The surrounding heaven and earth energy seemed to be affected by this force and started to surge. The huge totem on the wall suddenly spun faster. A violent and majestic aura surged out from it. Nan Yifan and the rest were the first to bear the brunt. They didn't even have time to set up a barrier before they were enveloped by the terrifying force. Under the impact of this power, the figures of several people instantly flew out uncontrollably. In a hurry, Nan Yifan hurriedly pulled Nan Yuxing. But before he could pull him, he missed. Bang! They fell to the ground one after another. Nan Yuxing's chest shook, and he spat out another mouthful of blood. Yuxing. Big brother. Nan Yifan and the rest struggled to get up. Seeing this scene, they were almost scared out of their wits. But at this moment, a few figures rushed out from the black wall. Nan Yifan saw the two people in front clearly. Elder Wu Peng. Elder Bai Tong. He had just helped Nan Yuxing up and was about to go over when he suddenly heard a crisp sound. Crack. Something seemed to have broken. Nan Yifan suddenly thought of something, and his eyes widened. He quickly took out a jade token. Of the 4 light spots inside, there were now only 3. Among them, the one that belonged to Elder Bai Tong had broken. Elder Bai Tong was dead. He sucked in a cold breath. The remaining 2 elders hurried over. Elder Wu Peng, how are you? Although Elder Wu Peng was still conscious, his face and body were stained with blood, and his breath was weak. It was obvious that he was seriously injured. Elder Jean he immediately helped him treat his injuries. The other elder came to Elder Bai Tong's side and realized that he was no longer breathing. He looked at Nan Yifan in panic. Family head, Elder Bai Tong. Nan Yifan closed his eyes and waved his hand. That elder immediately understood what he meant. With a heavy heart, he moved Elder Bai Tong's body to the side, preparing to bring it back for burial. Nan Yifan glanced out of the corner of his eye and saw that a section of Elder Bai Tong's calf had been cut off. He frowned. Elder Bai Tong's leg. What's going on? It doesn't look like a recent injury. Nan Yi hesitated for a moment. She had only mentioned that Elder Bai Tong had been injured during the battle with Shang Wanyu, but she had not mentioned that his leg had been cut off by Rong Xiu. That is, before she could explain, another figure fell out of the black wall. Nan Yi instinctively looked over and her eyes lit up. Uncle Luo Yen. The man who fell to the ground and stood up with one hand supporting himself was none other than Luo Yen. Hearing this voice, Luo Yen looked up. When he saw Nan Yi, he heaved a sigh of relief. Then, he turned his gaze and saw Nan Yifan and the others. It turned out that they had already arrived. Luo Yen wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and was about to walk towards them when he suddenly felt a chill all over his body. He immediately became alert. His entire body tensed up. At this moment, he realized that there were 2 men standing not far away from Nan Yifan and the others. They were burly and had unfamiliar faces. However, they were extremely strong. When he saw the appearance of the man standing in front of him, Luo Yen suddenly thought of something and his expression changed slightly. This person was Luo Yen. Nan Yifan walked over and sized him up. After confirming that he had only suffered some minor injuries, he heaved a sigh of relief. At this point, all of their people had come out. Other than Elder Bai Tong, Elder Wu Peng and Nan Yuxing were both seriously injured. Nan Yi and Luo Yen were in a slightly better condition, but they obviously needed a long time to recuperate. He wondered if there would be any side effects. Nan Yifan had mixed feelings. On one hand, he was glad that these people, except for Elder Bai Tong, had all come out alive. On the other hand, the battle was tragic and their injuries were serious. Especially Nan Yuxing, who had become a cripple. It was more painful for him than death. At the same time, it also made Nan Yifan's heart ache. Luo Yen nodded. Patriarch, don't worry. I'm fine. He quickly scanned his surroundings and basically determined what the situation was. He had known that it was extremely dangerous inside, so it was normal for such an outcome. Now, his attention was more on the 2 unfamiliar men. Those 2 are. Nan Yifan came back to his senses and said, "Oh, I almost forgot to introduce them to you. These 2 are Patriarch Yi Zhao and Elder Yi Yu of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan." Luo Yen was shocked. He had already guessed that these two might be important figures in the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, but he didn't expect that Yi Zhao, the patriarch, would also come. Suddenly, he thought of something. Perhaps they came for the contracted Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix in Shangguanyu. Luo Yan suppressed the many thoughts in his heart and bowed politely. Yi Zhao frowned slightly. These people had all come out, but why wasn't there any movement from Dumpling and the rest? Seeing that Yi Zhao didn't pay much attention to him, Luo Yan wasn't angry. The other party was famous for his arrogance, so it was normal for him to have such an attitude. Besides, from the looks of it, he should still be waiting for the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix to come out, right? In fact, everyone present had such doubts in their hearts. Since both sides went in together, why was it that only Nan Yi and the rest came out, but the other party didn't come out at all? This made people think more about it. Nan Yifan thought for a moment and said, "Yi, do you think Shangguanyu and the rest will still come out?" He hated the other party to the bone and couldn't wait to end their lives with his own hands. Nan Yi paused and sneered. Who knows? Maybe they've already died in there. Chi. Two figures appeared almost at the same time. Nan Yi looked over and her heart sank. These two people were actually Nan Suhuai and Chu Ning. What was even more shocking was that other than a few sporadic wounds on their bodies, they were actually fine. From their expressions and state, it was obvious that they weren't injured much. Nan Yifan originally wanted to surround them immediately, but after seeing Nan Suhuai, he was stunned. Why was the dean of Lingshao College here? At the same time, Nan Suhuai also noticed the strange atmosphere around him and looked over. Nan Yifan. He had actually brought people over. No, the point was that Nan Yi and the rest seemed to have come out before them. Looking around, Nan Suhuai didn't see the person he wanted to see and couldn't help but feel disappointed and worried. Suddenly, his expression changed. Clan leader Yi Zhao. Why are you here? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1713. Nan Yi suddenly snorted. He actually had the cheek to ask this question. President Nan, don't you know what your precious disciple has done? She must be tired of living to contract a crimson gold heavenly phoenix. Nan Suhuai was stunned. He guessed what Nan Yi was referring to, but wasn't this matter already resolved before? Rong Xiao had clearly sent a letter saying that you had brought Dumpling out of Phoenix God Mountain safely. He had always thought that this matter had been satisfactorily resolved. Could it be that he had guessed wrongly? Yi Zhao said lightly. I'm indeed here to look for Shangguanyu and Dumpling. Nan Suhuai's heart sank. What exactly was going on? If they didn't reach a satisfactory conclusion, Yi Zhao would never let them go and even allowed them to leave with Dumpling. Why did he suddenly? Nan Suhuai took a closer look at him. Yi Zhao's expression was calm and nothing could be seen. For a moment, he was a little nervous. If Yi Zhao was really here to cause trouble for them, then, Elder Yu's gaze landed on Chu Ning and he was a little surprised. Nan Suhuai frowned. Elder Yu's lips curled into a smile before he shifted his gaze away. This man must be the person Shangguanyu was looking for in the god-slaying tomb this time. According to what Nan Yi said, Shangguanyu called him Daddy, so they must be father and daughter. He was just a stage 1 warrior, but he had a god realm. If he guessed correctly, he most likely had an indestructible divine body. Shangguanyu was already surprising enough, but he didn't expect her father to be just as extraordinary. This family was really... Nan Suhuai heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that Elder Yu had no intention of causing trouble for them. He turned to look at Chu Ning, only to find that the latter looked calm as if she didn't take this matter to heart. Nan Suhuai couldn't help but lean closer and ask in a low voice. Chu Ning, are you really not worried at all? Chu Ning was stunned. Worried? What are you worried about? Nan Su Hui choked and shifted his gaze away. Those two are the clan leader and the fifth elder of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Chu Ning nodded. I know. And then? What was the point of asking then? Nan Su Hui almost couldn't breathe. Did Chu Ning not know how big of a trouble it was for you, to contract a Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix in private? Dumpling. Chu Ning blinked. Looking at Nan Su Hui's nervous expression, she suddenly understood something. Nan, do you still not know? Boom. Before he could finish speaking, the sound of an intense collision of energy suddenly rang out. Everyone turned around and saw two figures, one in front and one behind, rushing out from the black wall. However, the person in front of him was illusory and translucent. It was actually just a soul. The person behind him was tall and sturdy. There seemed to be magma surging wildly in Nan Yifan's chest, as if it would rush out in the next moment. Nan Yuxing was crippled, Elder Bai Tong was dead, and Nan Yi and Elder Wu Ping were seriously injured. This time, they could be said to have suffered heavy losses. Nan Yifan had a belly full of anger and didn't know where to vent it. But Nan Suhui seemed indifferent to his agitated emotions. He smiled. Of course, Nan Yi would gloss over everything and describe everything in a way that was beneficial to her. And Nan Yifan doted on her so much, so he naturally believed her without a doubt. If there was no solid evidence, it was useless no matter how much others said. Seeing that Nan Suhui didn't speak, Nan Yifan thought that he was guilty and sneered. Why, Nan doesn't intend to continue. If you really have the confidence, why don't you confront me on the spot? Nan Suhui narrowed his eyes slightly. Confront? He was probably going to pester endlessly. Nan Yifan was even more certain of his guess. He raised his chin slightly and said coldly. If you don't dare to confront me, please step aside immediately. Just as he finished speaking, a clear and cold voice, like the sound of jade striking stone, suddenly sounded. I will confront you. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Shengwan Jing's heart stirred slightly. He finally knew what was wrong. When Rong Xiu said these words, he was using a declarative sentence. His tone was too matter-of-fact, as if he didn't care about the objections of others at all. To put it bluntly, Rong Xiu's words were actually for everyone present to hear. This was an order. Shengwan Jing was secretly shocked. He knew that Rong Xiu had a noble status and had always been high and mighty. But apart from him, the head of the Nan family, Nan Yifan, was also here today. The Nan family's status was higher than Yuntian Towers. If he said this, Nan Yifan, Shengwan Jing subconsciously looked at Nan Yifan and was suddenly stunned. Why did Nan Yifan's reaction seem a little off? Nan Yi had also noticed this. After seeing Rong Xiu appear, her emotions were very complicated. Although all the previous twists and turns had already worn away most of her liking for Rong Xiu, it was very difficult for her to completely oppose Rong Xiu. But Rong Xiu obviously didn't take her seriously and even came out to confront her. It would be a lie to say that Nan Yi didn't feel upset. At the same time, she was also angry. Hence, she finally decided to ask her father for help, Nan Yifan. Rong Xiu and the rest were extremely rude to her previously. Now that her father was here, let's see how they could still be arrogant. However, Nan Yifan didn't respond even after Nan Yi shouted twice. Father! Father! She frowned strangely and tugged at Nan Yifan's sleeve. Only then did Nan Yifan come back to his senses and look at her with a stiff expression. What's wrong? Nan Yi frowned even more. What's wrong? Wasn't the situation already right in front of her? Father, are you all right? Nan Yi asked nervously. He had always been high-spirited and she rarely saw him with such an expression. Why didn't you mention it before? Nan Yifan didn't finish speaking, but Nan Yi already understood. Was he talking about Rongxiu? Nan Yi was about to defend herself when she suddenly remembered what Rongxiu had said previously. Wait a minute. From the looks of it, her father and Rongxiu really knew each other. Patriarch Nan, long time no see. Rongxiu looked at Nan Yifan and said indifferently. Nan Yifan's expression instantly became subtle. His jaw tightened and he squeezed out an extremely stiff smile. A long time no see. Successor. As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere in the field instantly became even more strange. Almost everyone looked at Nan Yifan with a strange look in their eyes. Especially the people from the Nan family. When they heard Nan Yifan call out the words successor so politely, it was as if they had seen a ghost. He was the patriarch of the Nan family. Whether it was status, experience, or strength, he was much higher than Rongxiu. Why did it seem like he was the one who was more nervous and perturbed now? Nan Yi widened her eyes. Father. She knew her father too well. He would never be so polite to someone for no reason. In fact, there was even a hint of reverence and fear. Although Nan Yifan hid his emotions very well, Nan Yi, who was standing beside him, saw everything. Nan Yifan looked at her sternly. This girl actually skipped over such an important matter. If he had known that Rongxiu was also involved, Nan Yi's heart turned cold from his gaze. No wonder Rongxiu directly guessed their identity and was so disdainful. They originally thought that he was pretending, but now, they were afraid that wasn't the case. But why did her father have to be so polite to a mere successor of Yuntian Tower? Nan Yi's heart was in turmoil. When she thought of the things that had happened before, she felt terrible. Nan Yifan couldn't be bothered with her as he forced a smile and cupped his hands at Rongxiu. I didn't expect the successor to be here too. What a coincidence, haha, what a coincidence. Rongxiu's eyes were cold and his voice was indifferent. The Shengguanyu that you said you wanted to teach a lesson to is the mistress of Yuntian Tower, I's princess consort. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 17:15. Nan Yifan's mind buzzed. It was as if an invisible hammer had smashed him on the head, causing him to freeze on the spot. The matriarch of Yuntian Tower, that's right. He finally remembered why the name Shengguanyu sounded familiar. Wasn't that the princess whom Rongxiu had personally appointed? This matter had spread like wildfire among the many aristocratic families in the Divine Ruins. However, the Nan family had never cared much about these things, and their subordinates would never mention it in front of him. He had only found out about it after inquiring about it in private. However, this matter had passed for a long time, and almost no one around him had mentioned it. Over time, he had forgotten about it. That was why he didn't think of it when he heard the name Shengguanyu. Miscalculation. What a miscalculation. At this moment, Nan Yifan was so regretful that his intestines turned green. That was Rongxiu's woman. Why did he have to take things so hard that he threatened to cause trouble for her? He even brought so many people from the Nan family to fall out with them. Look at these people. Among them, there was the father of Shengguanyu, the master of Shengguanyu, and the Taizu of Shanghai Yu. Offending them was undoubtedly offending Shengguanyu. Wasn't that the same as offending Rongxiu? Nan Yifan finally couldn't laugh anymore. This time, even his stiff fake smile became very forced. He swallowed his saliva with difficulty and spat out a few words with great difficulty. Misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding. Hey, didn't second Miss Nan just say that they were reduced to such a miserable state because of that B*TCH in Shengguanyu? In the almost suffocating silence, Elder Yu suddenly spoke. He blinked. Just now, the head of the Nan family seemed to have said that he wanted to avenge them. How did it suddenly become a misunderstanding? Yi Zhao glanced at him. After so many years, his bad habit of watching a show had not changed. However, this time, he was happy to watch the show. As soon as Elder Yu spoke, Nan Yifan had a bad premonition. After listening to him, he could only gnash his teeth in hatred. Why did this Yu just have to come out and stir up trouble at this time? If he didn't do it on purpose, then he must have seen a ghost. However, he could no longer be bothered to question Elder Yu. Instead, he immediately looked up at Rongxiu. No, it's not like that. Therefore, meeting Rongxiu's eyes, Nan Yifan's voice suddenly stopped. He felt as if his throat was being strangled by an invisible hand. The rest of his words were stuck in his throat, and he couldn't say anything. That deep and cold gaze fell on her, chilling her to the bone. Oh. Rongxiu's voice was light as he looked at Nanyi. Is what Elder Yu said true? Nanyi felt as if she had fallen into an ice cave. She had never felt so clearly that she was only one step away from death. Nan Yifan was so angry that his chest violently rose and fell, and his palm was still trembling slightly. Eldest young master. The elders standing at the side were also stunned when they saw the situation. They only came back to their senses when they saw blood seeping out from the corner of Nan Yuxing's mouth. Just as they were about to go over to help Nan Yuxing, they heard Nan Yifan shout again. No one is allowed to help him. His voice was stern, and the two elders didn't dare to disobey. They could only stand there awkwardly and let Nan Yuxing's body sway and fall to the ground. Nan Yuxing was already seriously injured, and Nan Yifan had used a lot of strength in this slap. It wasn't something that he could withstand. Almost everyone didn't understand why Nan Yifan's attitude had taken a 180-degree turn. However, they weren't stupid. They knew that there must be an unknown reason, so they all tactfully kept their mouths shut. Nan Yifan closed his eyes, then looked at Rongxiu. Successor, my son offended you just now. Please forgive him. Rongxiu raised his eyebrows slightly. Just because of this slap. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 17-16. It was obvious what he meant. Not enough. Nan Yifan clenched his fists. He knew that Rongxiu wasn't someone to be trifled with and that it wouldn't be easy to get past him. Hence, he purposely gave Nan Yuxing a tight slap. However, Rongxiu did not appreciate it. He clenched his teeth and walked over to Nan Yuxing without saying a word. He dragged him up and gave him another slap. This time, it was a slap to the face. Crisp. Loud. Before Nan Yuxing could react, there was a loud noise in his head and a sharp pain came. Bang! He fell to the ground again and spat out a mouthful of blood. This time, Nan Yuxing was so dizzy that he almost fainted. Nan Yifan paused. Rongxiu did not say a word. He took a deep breath and gave Nan Yuxing a few more slaps. Nan Yuxing could not say a word this time. After spitting out a few mouthfuls of blood, his eyes rolled back and he fainted. Nan Yifan closed his eyes. How could he not feel distressed and upset? However, at this moment, he could not think of any other way to solve the problem. At this point, Rongxiu finally spoke. Why do you have to do this, Nan family head? I am not a narrow-minded person. Why would I care about what he said? Nan Yifan spat out a mouthful of blood. You don't care. If you don't care, why didn't you say anything earlier? You only spoke when Nan Yuxing fainted. However, he could not say these words directly. Nan Yifan threw Nan Yuxing to the ground. He spoke rudely to the saint and should be taught a lesson. Speaking of which, it's my fault for not teaching my son well. I'm really ashamed. When Nan Yifan said this, there was a hint of anger on his face. It was as if he wanted to kick Nan Yuxing a few more times. Rong Xiu looked at Nan Yuxing, who was lying on the ground, and his thin red lips curled up slightly. No matter what, Nan Yuxing is the only son of the Nan family head. Now that his core of essence has been shattered and he has become a cripple, how can he bear the punishment of the Nan family head? As he spoke, he raised his chin. Elders, please treat him as soon as possible. Every word was like a steel knife, ruthlessly stabbing into Nan Yifan's heart. His face paled, but in the end, he waved his hand. The two elders standing at the side hurriedly stepped forward. It wasn't easy for Nan Yuxing's condition to take a turn for the better. With these few slaps, all of his previous efforts had been wasted. It was even worse than the beginning. Nan Yifan then turned around and looked at Rong Xiu. His expression was extremely restrained. Saint, there were many misunderstandings in the past. However, I have already taught them a harsh lesson. Do you think we can let this matter pass? Anyone could tell that Nan Yifan was begging for mercy. Elder Yu couldn't help but chuckle and whisper, interesting. Although Yuntian Tower was a first-class aristocratic family, it was still slightly inferior to the Nan family. Nan Yi clutched his sleeves tightly. Her eyes were red and bean-sized tears kept falling. Father! Don't be like this. She had clearly seen her elder brother's miserable state just now. At this moment, she completely understood that her father was indeed extremely afraid of Rong Xiu. If her father really agreed to this request, hot tears fell on the back of Nan Yifan's hand. He closed his eyes and held Nan Yi's hand. I don't agree to this condition. He could accept other punishments, but he was definitely not willing to sacrifice his bloodline. Just now, he seemed to be extremely ruthless towards Nan Yuxing, but in fact, he had been controlling his strength and skills, so he didn't cause any fatal injuries. But if he handed Nan Yi to Rong Xiu to deal with the consequences, he didn't even dare to think about it. Rong Xiu didn't look surprised, as if he had already expected this. The corners of his lips seemed to be smiling as he said lightly, Patriarch Nan, I've already given you face. Unfortunately, he didn't want it. Nan Yifan immediately tensed up. Sensing his nervousness, Nan Yi had a bad feeling. Suddenly, she had an idea and shouted at Yi Zhao and Elder Yu in a sharp voice. Patriarch Yi Zhao. That Shengwan you privately contracted the crimson gold heavenly phoenix, which is a heinous crime. Rong Xiu is also wrong for trying to cover it up. Are you really going to sit back and do nothing? Digression, it's the last 3 days, please vote. Every extra vote can be added to the explosive update on the 11th of next month. Xiaoxiang and QQ Reading have super surprise New Year's Day activities respectively, and they have already pinned the comment section to welcome everyone to participate. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 17:17. When Elder Yu heard this, he almost laughed out loud. Nan Yi was really crazy. She was about to die, but she still dared to say such things. She was afraid that she wouldn't die completely. Based on the current situation, the Nan family was completely at a disadvantage. Nan Yi was undoubtedly treating them as her last straw, and she was still hoping that they would help her. Even if they were really here to cause trouble for Shengwanyu, what did it have to do with her? They couldn't be bothered if Rong Xiu wanted to cut off her tongue. Yi Zhao frowned slightly, and a trace of impatience finally appeared on his face. Nanny thought that she had persuaded the other party and was secretly delighted. Then, she heard Rong Xiao laugh and ask. Clan leader Yi Zhao, do you want to help them? Yi Zhao spat out coldly. What does their life and death have to do with me? The reason why he was impatient was purely because he felt that it was too noisy after hearing Nanny talk about this over and over again. Rong Xiao nodded, and a smile appeared on his lips. Thank you for your understanding, clan leader Yi Zhao. The two of them had only exchanged a few words and had already finalized the result. One couldn't be bothered, while the other was determined to kill. Nanny felt like she had fallen into an ice cave. She never expected that the other party would be so indifferent. Nanny was almost crazy after being forced into a desperate situation. She shouted at the top of her lungs. Clan leader Yi Zhao. Do you really not mind at all that Shengwan you contracted the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix privately? Even if the bloodline of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan is tarnished, you don't care at all. Yi Zhao's eyes turned cold. He was about to speak when he suddenly sensed something and looked up. Splash! The sound of tide surging could be heard. Everyone looked over and realized that the energy of heaven and earth around the black wall was surging rapidly into the huge and mysterious totem. It was daytime now, and the originally clear sky quickly became gloomy. Dark clouds gathered, stacking on top of each other. The sky was covered by thick clouds, and everything between heaven and earth seemed to be shrouded in a layer of shadow. Only the totem on the black wall shone brighter and brighter. Then, with the totem as the center, the blackness on the wall suddenly began to fade away. The originally thick and mottled stones gradually became transparent, glowing with a sparkling and translucent luster. As for the totem, it finally began to show its original brilliant colors. Everyone was deeply shocked by this scene. For a moment, their minds were shaken, and they didn't know how to react. This wall had endured the baptism of tens of thousands of years in the god-slaying mound, but it still stood proudly. It was always deep and heavy. Every stone piled on top of it was deeply engraved with everything that had happened here. Moreover, they were so loyal and sincere. This time, she didn't believe that Yi Zhao and the rest could tolerate it. She sneered, turned her head, and said, Clan leader Yi Zhao, did you see that? Not only did Shengwan you contract with your own kind, but she also ordered her around and completely treated her as her slave. Can you really take this lying down? She thought that Yi Zhao would definitely fly into a rage after seeing this scene and hearing these words. However, Yi Zhao's reaction was completely out of Nanyi's expectations. He stared intently at Dumpling, who was inside the wall. After confirming that she was safe and sound, he heaved a long sigh of relief. Then, he turned to look at Nanyi. Meeting those cold and dignified eyes, Nanyi suddenly felt a surge of uneasiness. What nonsense are you talking about? Yi Zhao's brows moved slightly, and he said calmly and dignified. Dumpling is Shengwan Yu's contracted beast. Isn't it normal to speak up for her? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 17-18. Nanyi widened her eyes in disbelief. Nan Yifan and the rest also quickly turned around and looked at Yi Zhao, almost suspecting that they were hallucinating. What did Yi Zhao just say? Very normal. He actually felt that this matter was very normal. Could it be that he's crazy? In an instant, Nanyi felt that the world was in chaos. Yi Zhao. He was famous in the Divine Ruins world. Almost everyone knew how much he hated and was indifferent to the human race. But now, his own clan had formed a contract with the human race, and he actually didn't care. All the words that Nanyi had prepared were suddenly stuck in her throat and she couldn't say anything else. She pinched herself hard and relied on this pain to confirm that she wasn't dreaming. And those words were indeed spat out by Yi Zhao. You. What do you mean? Nan Yi stuttered. At this moment, she had already sensed that things seemed to be different from what she had expected. She wanted to try to salvage the situation, but everything seemed to be sliding in a direction that she couldn't control. Yi Zhao said indifferently. It's literally what I said. He actually didn't care about this matter at all. Nan-Yi felt as if her heart was being gripped tightly by something. Even breathing had become difficult for him. But in that case, then, isn't that Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix equivalent to betraying the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan? Could it be that you also, second Miss Nan, are you kidding? Elder Yu interrupted her with a grin. Dumpling is the young master appointed by our ancestors and the next clan leader of our Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Anyone can betray our clan, but she is the only one who can't. His indifferent words were tantamount to a heavy hammer that smashed fiercely into Nan-Yi's heart. Her mind buzzed and instantly went blank. Young master, that Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix was actually the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. And it was appointed by their ancestors? Then, she said so much just now, wasn't it all a joke in their eyes? Nan-Yi's vision turned black and she fell to the ground. Second Miss. An elder was standing by the side. Seeing this, he hurriedly went forward and supported Nan-Yi. Second Miss, are you all right? Nan-Yi's legs went weak and she almost couldn't stand steadily. Her body was cold and her mind was in a mess. At this moment, she really wished that she would just faint. Everything that happened just now kept replaying in her mind, making her feel extremely embarrassed. She wished she could find a hole to hide in and never appear in front of these people again. To think that she had thought that by saying so much, she would be able to stir up a conflict between Yi Zhao and Sheng Wanyu. She had thought that she would be able to use this opportunity to destroy Shanghai Yu once and for all. Nan Yifan's face paled, his body swayed, and he almost fell. He had doted on Nan Yi since she was young. Now that he had to watch her tongue being cut off, how could he bear it? Blood kept flowing from the corners of Nan Yi's mouth and her face was filled with tears. She looked really miserable. The scene was dead silent. Other than her whimpering cries, there were no other sounds. Everyone was shocked by Rong Xiu's straightforward move. No one expected that Rong Xiu would actually do as he said. He said that he would cut off Nan Yi's tongue. Even if Nan Yifan and the rest stopped him, he would still do it. Rong Xiu was a little irritated by her mournful voice. He narrowed his eyes dangerously. If you continue to make noise, I have ways to shut you up forever. Nan Yi's voice stopped abruptly. Her blood surged, her chest and abdomen churned, and more blood flowed from the corners of her mouth. However, after being glanced at by Rong Xiu's deep and cold eyes, she didn't dare to make a sound. She had no doubt that Rong Xiu would definitely do this. Luo Yan walked over quickly. Nan Yi looked at him without saying a word, but tears kept falling. Luo Yan's heart ached when he saw her like this. He took out a pill and fed it to her. But Nan Yi's mouth was full of blood and she was in so much pain that she couldn't swallow the pill. The veins on Luo Yan's forehead bulged, but in the end, he could only endure it. He wanted to take revenge on Rong Xiu. However, this matter wasn't so easy. Not to mention that Rong Xiu's strength had increased a lot, he still had many trump cards that he hadn't revealed yet. It was really difficult to do anything to him. Just the attitude of the family head was too much to think about. Nan Yi was his only daughter and he had doted on her for so many years. How could his heart not ache? But, until now, Nan Yifan hadn't done anything to Rong Xiu. Coupled with his abnormal attitude when facing Rong Xiu previously, one couldn't help but think more about it. Nan Yifan would never be so polite to someone for no reason, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he would swallow his anger. He seemed to be rather afraid of Rongxiu. What was he afraid of? Luo Yan didn't know. However, he understood that the things that were involved in this matter had definitely exceeded their expectations. So much so that Nan Yifan could swallow his anger. Besides, even if they disregarded everything and fell out with Rongxiu, then, what about the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix? They were also on Shang Guanyu's side. In other words, all the grievances and pain today, Nan Yi had to bear it even if she didn't want to. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. She thought that her father would protect her. But, no. Everything that had happened in the past seemed like a joke now. Now that she was being treated like this, he didn't even have the slightest intention of seeking justice for her. How could Nan Yifan not know what she was thinking? But he also had his difficulties. He couldn't possibly let the entire Nan family go against Rongxiu and the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan for her, right? Moreover, she was clearly in the wrong this time. Even if word got out, they would be the ones in the wrong. Under such circumstances, what else could he do? Nan Yifan clenched his fists and his voice hardened. Luo Yan, take her back. Luo Yan closed his eyes and could only agree in the end. However, just as he was about to take Nan Yi away, Nan Yi suddenly started shaking her head frantically. Her face was full of rejection. Boo-hoo. She couldn't speak anymore. Every sound was like a heavy hammer that smashed into the hearts of everyone in the Nan family. She wasn't leaving. She definitely wasn't leaving. She wanted to stay here and see what Shang Guanyu was up to. Anyway, she was already in this state. What difference did it make whether she left or stayed? Sensing her resentment, Luo Yan hesitated for a moment before turning to look at Nan Yifan. Patriarch, if you want to leave, you can leave directly. I'll stay here and accompany ye. Nan Yifan was so angry that he felt suffocated. Was Luo Yan venting his anger on him as well? Was he having a good time? Nan Yuxing's pill of the essence had shattered and he was completely crippled. Nan Yi's tongue had been cut off and she had become a mute. As her father, wasn't he the one who was the most heartbroken? He suppressed the anger in his heart. Okay. Then we'll wait here together. We'll leave when she's willing to leave. The elders at the side wanted to comfort him, but the atmosphere was too cold and awkward. In the end, they chose to remain silent. No one cared whether they left or stayed. At this moment, Rongxiu, Yi Zhao, and the rest's attention was already on Chu Luyue and Dumpling. Everyone had come out, and only the two of them were still trapped inside. And for some reason, the black wall had started to become transparent, which made them feel even more uneasy. After a period of time, more than half of the black wall in front of everyone had faded. That strange totem had also revealed its original appearance. Mysterious and unfathomable, overflowing with light, majestic and awe-inspiring. Chu Liuyue's position was very subtle. Everyone looked from the outside and saw that she was right in the middle of the totem. She glanced at Nan Yi and retracted her gaze calmly, as if Nan Yi's life and death couldn't affect her at all. She threw away the paper in her hand. Her slender and delicate fingers moved gently, and another transparent paper flew over. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. That might not be a dream. But Patriarch, you always have a straight face. Aren't you being too serious? Which child would like it? As he spoke, he retreated to the side. If I stand here, Dumpling might not even come to hug me. Yi Zhao looked at him again. EU, no one will treat you as a mute if you don't speak. Elder EU trembled. Then, he straightened his neck. Who's afraid of who? As long as Dumpling was happy, so what if the patriarch was unhappy? Inside the wall, Chu Luiyue threw away the paper in her hand again. The sound of the zither rang in her ears. She raised her eyes and looked forward. And, the last 3. Digression, what's missing today will be made up for in tomorrow's update. Although it's lying in the draft box, it will still be published tomorrow, ha ha ha. Waving my little hands to beg for monthly votes. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1722. She had barely managed to memorize half of the entire song. In addition, the more she listened to it, the more pain and torture she felt at the beginning. The current Chu Luiyue could basically listen to the zither music calmly and flip through the zither scores in front of her. From over 10,000 copies to the last 3 copies, no one knew what kind of pain and suffering she had gone through in the process other than herself. But fortunately, all of this was finally coming to an end. The 3 transparent pieces of paper floated quietly in front of her. Chu Luiyue held her breath and watched intently. Then, she chose the middle one. The moment she held it in her hand, the transparent paper shone brightly. However, Chu Luiyue was already used to all of this as she calmly looked at it in detail. She was so focused that the onlookers outside couldn't help but quieten down, as if they were afraid of disturbing her. Nan Yifan stared at her for a while, his eyes full of scrutiny and suspicion, wandering back and forth between her and the transparent paper in his hand. He seemed to be suspecting something, but he wasn't sure. After thinking about it, he only felt a headache and had no choice but to rub his temples. Patriarch. A weak and low voice sounded. Nan Yifan turned his head to look, only to find that Elder Wu Ping had silently walked behind him without him noticing. Seeing that it was him, Nan Yifan's expression eased a little. Elder Wu Ping, what's the matter? Elder Wu Ping glanced at Nan Yi and said in a low voice. Patriarch, actually, Second Miss didn't mean to make things turn out like this. He had been with Nan Yifan for many years and could naturally tell that Nan Yifan felt sorry for Nan Yi, but at the same time, he also had some resentment. Originally, it was a good experience, but in the end, it turned out like this. This was something no one wanted to see. Nan Yifan thought that he was going to speak up for Nan Yi and frowned. Elder Wu Peng, since things have come to this, there are some things that really don't need to be said anymore. Patriarch, do you know why Second Miss has been chasing after them? Elder Wu Peng sighed. If it's really because of personal grudges, not to mention you, even I and eldest young master would never agree. These words made Nan Yifan's expression change slightly. He was well aware of Elder Wu Peng's character. It was indeed unlikely that he would allow Nan Yi to cause trouble. As for Nan Yuxing, although he was disappointed in his performance today, anyone who had their primordial core shattered and became a cripple wouldn't be able to calm down in a short period of time. So, there's really something else going on. Nan Yifan's expression became much more serious. If you have any difficulties, please tell me, Elder Wu Peng. Elder Wu Peng paused. The thing you asked second young mistress to find, seems to be on that Shengguan Yu. Nan Yifan's expression suddenly changed. First, he looked around to make sure that everyone's attention was on the Shengguan Yu. Then, he asked cautiously, really? Elder Wu Ping gently nodded. This old man has used the Great Star Catcher plate to deduce. Second young miss also sensed the aura of that thing on her body. There shouldn't be any mistake. Nan Yifan frowned and fell silent. If that was the case, then it was understandable why Nan Yi and the others had been chasing after Shengguan Yu. Why would that thing be on her body? Nan Yifan couldn't figure it out. I remember that you guys seem to have entered this god-slaying tomb together. Elder Wu Ping nodded as he briefly recounted the events that had transpired. Nan Yifan had mixed feelings. Previously, Nan Yi only said that there was some conflict between the two sides in the god-slaying tomb, but she didn't explain the cause and effect clearly. Now that Elder Wu Ping had explained it, many things could finally be explained. Although it was indeed Nan Yi and the others who had provoked the other party in the beginning. Later on, they had indeed been entangled with Sheng Wanyu and the others in order to find that thing, and it was precisely because of this that they had been swept into the black wall. Some of them had died, and some of them had been injured. In that case, it wasn't entirely Nan Yi's fault. So you're saying that they were one step ahead of you and found that thing? Nan Yifan's expression was cold. Elder Wu Ping thought for a moment and shook his head. Actually, I feel that ever since they entered the god-slaying tomb, they didn't have much time to look for this thing, and from the beginning to the end, Sheng Wanyu didn't seem to know what we were looking for. When she was fighting with Nan Yi at the end, what she said didn't seem to be false. Nan Yifan frowned. You mean, Elder Wu Ping didn't say anything for a moment and looked up. In the transparent space of the wall, the figure behind the totem sat quietly, determined and persistent. She seemed to have entered a meditative state, and no matter what happened outside, it couldn't cause the slightest ripple in her heart. At this moment, there were only a few transparent pieces of paper in her heart and in her eyes. Perhaps that thing has always been with her. Chu Luiyue looked at the zither score in her hand. The light flowing on it transformed into notes that constantly overlapped with the sound of the zither in her mind. However, halfway through, it finally got stuck again. She sighed softly, as if she had already expected this result, and didn't show any disappointment. She just threw away the paper in her hand with a calm expression. There were 2 pieces left. She didn't even look at it and directly took the one on the right. Suddenly, she paused and looked up slightly. The space she was in was completely divided into 2 halves with her as the center axis. On the left, there was a thick darkness. On the right, there was a bright light. The people waiting outside were actually there at this time. So they could see her, and she could see them. And in the darkness on the left, there was a person and a zither. Senior Ah Jing. Chu Luiyue turned her face slightly and looked over. Although it was dark, she could still see a blurry figure at the end of the darkness. The sound of the zither stopped. A low and lazy voice sounded, and it seemed to be more provocative than the sound of the zither. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows slightly. It's been hard on you. Ah Jing smiled. Oh. Why do you say that? Chu Luiyue raised her hand and took the other one. If I'm not wrong, no matter which one I look at first, the result will be the same, right? A faint smile appeared on her lips. Whether these so-called zither scores are real or fake, it's all up to you, isn't it? No matter which one I leave behind in the end, it doesn't matter. Because the real zither score must be on the last one. What he wanted was for her to finish reading all the zither scores. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.